My name is Celine Wren. And the day my husband hit me, my parents saw the bruise, then looked away. It wasn't even subtle. The mark under my left eye had already begun to bloom dark and angry, like a confession you couldn't swallow fast enough. I sat on the living room couch, one hand pressing a damp washcloth to my face, the other clenched in my lap. The front door creaked open without a knock, the way it always had when they visited. Grocery bags rustled. My mother stepped in first, her perfume still the same floral vanilla from when I was a child. Then she saw me. Her steps halted. 1 second, 2. Her eyes locked on mine, then dipped to the bruise. My father came in behind her, his mouth tightening, but neither of them said a word. Not even, "Are you okay?" Behind me, Clayton, shirtless, smug, leaned against the hallway wall with a beer in hand and said, "Sweet family. Raised you polite, huh?" They placed the bags on the counter like actors in a commercial, smoothed the plastic, and walked out. No questions, no concern, just silence. That was the moment I stopped expecting anyone to save me. When the door clicked shut, I stayed still, but something in me didn't. I lit a candle, small, simple. It flickered against the growing dusk like a whisper. I'm still here. And 30 minutes later, when the lock turned again, I wasn't the one who stayed down. 2 hours before they walked through the door, I was standing in our kitchen, barefoot, holding a half-folded towel, asking Clayton not to treat me like an obligation. That's the word I used. Obligation. I'd rehearsed it all day. He didn't even turn fully to look at me, just leaned against the counter, beer in hand, staring past me at the muted TV in the living room. "You done?" he asked. "I'm serious," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "You act like I'm furniture, like I'm here to be ignored until you trip over me." That's when the slap came. It wasn't loud, not like in the movies. It was quiet, sudden and efficient. The sound of flesh against flesh always sounds smaller than it feels. My head snapped sideways, the towel fell, and I stumbled into the edge of the kitchen island. The sting radiated from cheekbone to ear. And the silence afterward? That was louder than anything. He didn't apologize, not really. Clayton simply stepped back and said, "You always gotta make it a thing, Celine." Like my pain was an inconvenience. Like I'd ruined the mood. I pressed the cold granite against my face until the heat from my skin warmed it. My knees shook, but I didn't cry. I learned a long time ago that crying only makes it easier for them to dismiss you. A woman in tears is dramatic. A woman who's quiet? That unsettles people. By the time I made it to the couch, he was already half asleep in his recliner, snoring softly, the beer balanced precariously on his chest. I sat perfectly still. The pressure behind my left eye was building into a throb. I turned the TV volume down, not because he asked, but because I didn't want to hear laughter canned into some sitcom I no longer found amusing. Then the knock came, not his, theirs. The familiar creak of the front door opening pulled me upright. I didn't even have time to wipe my face. My parents entered with grocery bags and mild chatter. I remember thinking how normal they looked, how clean their shoes were. I turned my head, just enough for them to see it. My mother's grip on the bag faltered. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound followed. My father narrowed his eyes like he was solving a math problem. And in that second, I knew what they'd decided. It was easier to pretend they hadn't seen it. Clayton's voice carried from the hallway. "Sweet family. Raised you polite, huh?" That was it. That was all he had to say. It should have started a firestorm. But my parents just nodded. Polite, quiet, and went into the kitchen like nothing was wrong. I watched my mother rearrange a carton of eggs on the counter. Watched my father smooth a receipt before tossing it in the trash. No one asked. No one reached out. They left 5 minutes later, as if they'd only come by to drop off a casserole. I remember the way the door clicked shut behind them. Not a slam, just a quiet click, the kind you barely notice if you're not listening for it. But I was. Clayton chuckled behind me, then dozed off again. I sat in that silence for a long time. And then I stood. I walked to the bathroom, flipped on the light, and stared at the woman in the mirror. Her cheek was swollen, her lips slightly split, but her gaze was level, cold, focused. I opened the drawer beneath the sink and pulled out a plain black envelope, the kind you buy in a pack of 5, thinking you'll never use them all. I walked back out. The house was still quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like it's waiting for something to happen. I placed the envelope beside Clayton's beer bottle. Then I picked up my phone and opened the message thread labeled R, typed 2 words, "It's time," and hit send. Rachel arrived exactly 28 minutes later. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. The front door was unlocked, just like I'd said it would be. I heard it open while I sat in the hallway, outside the bedroom, back pressed to the wall, fingers still tingling from sending the message. When I stood, she was already inside. No coat, just a thick gray sweater and jeans. Her hair was pulled back tight. No makeup. In her left hand was a canvas duffel bag. Tucked under her right arm, the black folder. Rachel didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't pretend not to notice the bruise. Her eyes moved from my face to the empty beer bottle in the recliner and then back to me. That was enough. I gave her a small nod, and she set everything down on the floor beside the hallway rug. We didn't speak. There was no need. I walked to the kitchen, pulled the drawer open, and took out the envelope I'd placed earlier. Still sealed. Still sitting there like a secret with teeth. I ran my thumb along the flap, then left it exactly where it was, beside the now empty beer. Clayton stirred but didn't wake. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. His weight sagged into the recliner like a man who believed nothing could touch him. Rachel opened the folder. She worked with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, not for herself, but for others. I recognized every page, my handwriting, my pain made legible, a notarized power of attorney I'd signed at the UPS store 6 blocks away, copies of our joint bank statements with red circles drawn around late-night transfers, screenshots of messages he'd sent. "You're nothing but baggage." Texts I'd read 100 times in silence. Rachel pulled out a recording device no bigger than a lipstick tube. "Fresh batteries," she said simply, handing it to me. At the bottom of the folder was the lease, my name signed, her name on file as co-signer. A modest apartment 12 miles east, above a bakery, 2 months prepaid. "You don't owe me anything," she said quietly. I didn't answer, just looked at the folder, then back to her, and nodded again. The house was still. Outside, wind pushed dry leaves along the sidewalk. Inside, the air felt heavier, as if it knew something was shifting. Rachel placed a toothbrush beside the duffel, a change of clothes, a flash drive. "We'll only get one window," she said. "Once he's up, the mask goes back on." I nodded again. My voice hadn't returned yet, but something else had. A steadiness I hadn't felt in years. Back in the living room, Clayton grunted in his sleep, the chair creaking beneath him. I turned away, this time not out of fear, but because I had somewhere else to look. Rachel zipped the duffel. I picked up the folder. We didn't need to say what came next. The silence between us wasn't fear anymore. It was a plan. We had just stepped into the bedroom when the first floorboard creaked. Not ours. His. Rachel froze, her hand still resting on the duffel's strap. I didn't flinch. I'd been waiting for this sound. Clayton was awake. I crossed the room and opened the drawer beside the bed, pulling out a second envelope. Thicker, marked. I slid it under my arm and stepped back into the hallway, just as Clayton's shadow loomed near the corner. He wasn't fully alert yet. His hair was matted, and the t-shirt he'd thrown on was inside out, but his eyes were sharp. Too sharp for a man who claimed he'd just woken up. "What the hell is going on?" he asked, voice rough. I didn't respond. I held the envelope out, steady and silent, like a server presenting a check. He snatched it, confused, ripping it open with one aggressive motion. A handful of papers slipped into his hand, printouts of bank transactions, text transcripts, screenshots, medical notes, and one yellow sticky note at the end. "You'll want a lawyer, not a beer." His mouth opened, but no sound came. Behind me, Rachel stepped out of the bedroom, calm, a phone in one hand, camera already recording. "What is this?" he barked, lifting the papers. You think this means anything? You should read the third page, I said, voice level. That's the one with the ER report. He scanned it. The color drained from his face. You've lost it, he spat. You've been setting this up? Bringing strangers into my house? This is entrapment. Rachel didn't flinch. You touched her 36 minutes ago. Want me to play it back? He turned to her like he might lunge, but stopped halfway. She didn't move, didn't blink, just held the phone at eye level. The red light blinked steadily. You dragged your friend into our marriage? He said to me, voice rising. You trying to ruin me? I said nothing, just took a step closer and looked him in the eye for the first time all day. Smile, Clayton, I said quietly. You're finally on camera. His eyes twitched. His hand crumpled part of the paper in his grip. You're not stable. You're dangerous. I'm calling the cops. Please do, I replied. They already have a copy of that envelope. I gave it to them last night. For a second, I thought he might swing. The tension in his jaw, the way his shoulders squared. But then came the knock at the front door. 2 sharp raps, not a neighbor, not a delivery. Rachel stepped forward. Time! Clayton stood frozen as I walked past him. When I opened the door, 2 officers stood on the porch. One older, the other fresh-faced and tense. Celine Wren? The woman asked. Her voice was steady, but her eyes moved fast, scanning behind me. Yes, I said. Is he inside? I nodded. Just where you thought he'd be. Clayton's voice rose behind me. She's making this all up. She's got her friend here recording me. This is harassment. The younger officer moved past me without a word, stepping into the house like he'd done this before. Rachel handed the flash drive to the older one, who slipped it into a pouch without blinking. You'll want to start at minute 4, Rachel said. It's when he gets angry. Is that when I'm being attacked? Clayton shouted from the living room. Is that what this is now? Neither officer replied. The door shut behind them. I stood in the hallway, shoulders square, heart quiet. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like it belonged to him. It felt like a scene being documented. The house was empty by the time Rachel and I returned from the station. Not empty like before, when silence was something I curled into, hoping it wouldn't get louder. No, this time, the silence had weight, shape, intention. The kind that comes after you say something you can't take back, and don't want to. I unlocked the door to the small rental apartment Rachel had helped me find a week earlier. Beige walls, worn laminate, a kitchen so forgettable it didn't even try to hide its age. I dropped my keys on the counter, my hands still tingling from hours of interviews, affidavits, and evidence folders. Rachel set the duffel on the couch, then paused. You want me to stay? I shook my head. No? This part. I need to do alone. She didn't argue. She just squeezed my shoulder and left the apartment with a soft click behind her. For a while, I just stood there, hands hanging by my sides, like my body hadn't quite figured out it was safe yet. I sat at the kitchen table, that cheap kind with the peeling veneer, and stared at my phone. One name hovered near the top of my screen. Mom. Not Janice. Not Mother. Just Mom. The name I hadn't said out loud since she looked at my bruised face and turned away. I tapped the icon. It rang twice before she picked up. Celine, she said, like the sound of my name surprised her. Her tone was flat. Not worried, not angry, just level. He's been arrested, I said. Pause. For what? She asked. For what he's done to me. Another pause. Longer. I imagined her sitting in the living room, hands folded, eyes on the rug like she always did when she didn't want to see what was in front of her. I kept going, not because I needed her approval, but because I needed to hear myself say it to someone who once tucked me in and told me monsters weren't real. The bruises, the screaming, the money he stole. I thought maybe you saw something. I thought maybe you'd say something. Her answer came soft but hard. Marriage isn't perfect, Celine, but airing your dirty laundry like this, we raised you stronger than that. My hands curled around the edge of the table. There it was, the line she'd drawn. I didn't yell, I didn't hang up. I just set the phone down and let her voice fade into the background until it was gone. I reached into my bag and pulled out the journal Rachel had given me 2 months ago. I opened to a fresh page and wrote one line. Today, I buried the last illusion. I don't need her to understand. I just need to stop needing her. I closed it. Across the room, my laptop blinked awake. I sat down, opened a blank email, and typed an address I'd bookmarked weeks earlier. Alyssa Carrington, investigative journalist. The woman who'd once brought down a state senator and survived the blowback. Subject line, in case no one else listens. I attached everything: photos, audio files, text threads, bank transfers, the affidavit from the ER nurse, even the court filing Rachel and I had just submitted. And then I added one final sentence at the end of the email. If I disappear, this is my voice. Publish it anyway. Then I hit send. I didn't cry. I didn't pray. I didn't even pace. I just leaned back in the chair, listening to the silence, no longer afraid of it. The article went live on a Monday morning. I didn't check obsessively. I didn't have to. By 8 a.m., my inbox was full. Some messages from strangers, some from old acquaintances pretending they hadn't seen the Bruises years ago. But one message stopped me cold. I read your story. I was one of his patients. Thank you for not staying quiet. It was signed simply, Camille. I set my phone down. My hands didn't shake. Not from fear. Not anymore. That afternoon, Rachel picked me up in her beat-up Civic and drove us to the Mason Street Community Center. The room still smelled like burnt coffee and old plastic chairs. 2 women were already seated at the fold-out table, Dana and Alina. We'd never met, but there was no awkwardness, just a knowing quiet. We greeted each other not like survivors, but like women who had already passed through fire and come out thinking clearly. Dana spoke first. We're not here to share war stories, right? No, I said. We're here to change the pattern. Each of us pulled out folders, flash drives, old screenshots, court dismissals, police reports that went nowhere, photos taken in silence, statements signed but never read, the things the system once overlooked, the things we refused to bury anymore. Rachel had set up a secure drive, labeled with a decoy name. We uploaded everything. By sundown, our landing page was live. Just a white screen. 3 names, 3 testimonies, and 1 statement in bold. We are not asking for justice. We are showing you the proof you refuse to see. My last upload was a recording. Clayton's voice slurred, mocking. Even if you scream, no one's listening. Below it, I typed a single line. We heard each other. Then I logged off and shut the laptop. The wind outside had picked up, but for the first time, it didn't feel like something to brace against. It felt like something was shifting. With us. The courthouse was quiet when I returned. No reporters, no courtroom crowd. Just the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the soft shuffle of clerks closing out the day. I walked in alone, a sealed envelope in hand, final divorce paperwork, protective order attached. I didn't pause. I didn't flinch. I handed it to the clerk at the counter. Final filing? He asked. Yes. He stamped it, slid it into a tray, and didn't look up again. That was fine. I wasn't here for a performance. Outside, the sun was dipping below the buildings, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Rachel was waiting near the steps. She didn't wave. She just smiled. Small, steady. Behind her stood Dana and Alina. No speeches, no dramatics, just presence. I came here alone once, I murmured. But I'm leaving with sisters. They nodded. Alina pressed something into my hand before we parted. A small, unlit candle. For your window, she said, in case someone else is still out there, waiting to believe it gets better. That night, in my quiet apartment, I lit it. Not for grief, not for rage, for peace. Its light flickered against the glass, soft but sure, like a signal. Not everything had healed, not yet. But I wasn't hiding anymore, and I wasn't alone.